3 nights after a violent meteor storm, a lonely mechanic steps into his worn repair bay and finds the unthinkable. 2 massive draconian younglings, royal heirs marked with platinum collars, lie broken and bleeding among his scattered tools. Federation law says report them. His heart says help them. But when their golden eyes open and whisper for mercy, a single choice will decide if he lives as a traitor or becomes the spark that changes the galaxy forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The meteor shower had ended 3 nights ago, but the grit still hissed along the outer hull when the cooling fans kicked on. Milo Hart, who kept Outpost Helix 12's forgotten corner alive with patchwork tools and stubborn patience, stepped into his repair bay and froze. 2 shapes lay among his scattered spanners and a half-open thruster crate. They were not crates, nor cargo. They were dragons. Not the distant myths from nursery tales, and not the restless space serpents the freight crews gossiped about. These were draconians, scaled, winged, power held tight under wounded stillness. Even young, they dwarfed the loader skiff. The smaller one shimmered in deep green, an emerald river under harsh work lights. The larger one glowed like banked embers, crimson and bronze latticed over dense muscle. Both wore platinum collars veined with tiny crystals, symbols Milo had only seen in news feeds. Royal marks. Milo's first breath sounded too loud, so he held the second. Regulation said, report immediately. Regulation said, if Draconians were on a human outpost without papers, you called security and stood well back. Regulation said treason was a quick way to meet cold space, but the Green One's wing membrane was torn, sticky with dark, opalescent blood. The Crimson One breathed in sips, each ribbed exhale rattling a shelf of rivet tins. No one stumbles into my bay by choice, Milo whispered, not sure who he was talking to. So you ran, and you got hurt doing it. The scanner on his wrist wasn't meant for non-human biology, but it could read distress. It flashed red for both. The green youngling, later he would learn the name Galeclaw, had lacerations from jagged rock. The larger, Embercrest, had a deep chest gash and a badly twisted forelimb. On the floor by their claws, a sliver of hull plating was scored with something like writing, as if someone had tried to leave a message, but blacked out before finishing. The bay alarms gave a brief chirp. Out beyond the shuttered viewport, 3 Federation patrol craft idled with their lights running slow circles. Milo's stomach turned. Patrol ships meant questions, and questions meant forms, and forms meant consequences. He could lie. He could move the bodies to the corridor and claim surprise. Security might even commend his caution. Yet the Crimson Dragon's eyes flickered, focused, and found Milo's face with a clarity that burned. Not rage, not superiority. Fear. The kind of fear Milo recognized from the day his best maintenance contract vanished and the accounts screamed empty. Speak, the dragon rasped, voice a low hum that made the deck vibrate. Please, help, my brother. Milo's hands started to shake, then steadied as if some old memory reached forward and held them. He fetched the industrial sealant unit, the one he used for ruptured coolant lines, and began to alter settings he'd never altered before. This was nonsense. This was brave. This was both. I'm Milo, he said. I can try. The Crimson Dragon tried to push himself upright, winced, and still shifted enough that Milo could access the Green One's torn wing. Together, one human with a modded tool and one dragon barely standing, they turned the injured body with care. The green youngling made a soft sound like wind in leaves and pressed his snout to the floor. Trusting strangers because there was no other path. Names? Milo asked. Because names made people real and fear manageable. Embercrest, the Crimson One murmured. And this is Galeclaw. Milo saw the collars then. Platinum etched with small patterns that looked like constellations. Royalty. If they were missing, fleets would come. If fleets came, no outpost would stay quiet. The scanner pinged again. Shock edging in. Oxygen low. He aligned the sealant head and whispered, "This will sting." The polymer hissed into the torn membrane, knitting a barrier that might hold until real medgel could be found. A chime sounded from the bay door. Someone was overriding the lock. Milo Hart, a crisp voice called, even through steel. Security inspection. Milo's mind raced through the useless library of his panic. Lock the door? Impossible. Hide 2 giant dragons? Silly. Stall? Maybe. He set the sealant unit down and looked at Embercrest. The young dragon lifted his chin and spoke in slow, careful standard. "We fled? An arrangement," he said. "My brother was promised to a cruel line. We ran. There were stones in the sky. We fell. We ask mercy, not war." The chime sounded again. This time, the lock accepted the foreign code. The door slid back with polite defiance, and Commander Arden Frost stepped in. His uniform was immaculate. His eyes were measuring. 4 armored soldiers spread out, barrels held low but not slack. "Reports of unregistered life signs," Frost said. "And a mechanic who sometimes forgets to file forms on time." Milo stood between the commander and the dragons. There was no clever speech in him, just a very simple truth. "They're injured," he said. "I'm helping." Frost's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Help can be treason if aimed the wrong way. Embercrest shifted behind Milo. The soldiers tensed. Fresh fear quivered along the air like static. Then another sound cut through it all. The deep, resonant thrum of ships dropping from faster than light. The outpost lights flickered. Heavy shadows slid across the bay doors as something enormous docked with the ring. Milo felt smaller than a bolt as a presence filled the corridor outside. Age, power, patience layered like rock. When the outer doors parted, the hangar seemed to narrow to a point. There, framed in cold light, stood Sovereign Flintscale of Draconis, a figure out of distant news feeds and childhood rumor. Wings furled, scales like starless night, eyes old as Memo. He looked at Milo as if weighing 1,000 little choices that had led to this single door. Then the Sovereign spoke, voice a stone-warm hum that made tools tremble on their pegs. "Little Maker," he said, "are you the human who once chose kindness when all advice said otherwise?" Milo swallowed. He thought of a battered escape pod months ago. A draconian girl he'd bandaged and pushed toward safety. A debt he'd never expect to be named. "I patched a stranger," he said. "That's all." "That is not all," the Sovereign replied, eyes softening for a breath. "It is the start." Commander Frost shifted, wary. The Sovereign's gaze moved to the commander for a single heartbeat, then returned to Milo. "Let us see," the ancient dragon said, "what you begin today." And the bay held still, like the moment before sunrise, while a new rule took shape under the hum of worn lights. The repair bay felt too small for so many uniforms and so much history. Commander Frost stood at Milo's left with a practiced calm that was almost kind. Sovereign Flintscale filled the right side with quiet gravity. The 4 troopers kept their eyes on the dragons and their fingers just shy of triggers. Somewhere above, maintenance drones clicked along the ceiling rails and decided not to get involved. "Protocol requires I detain unauthorized Draconians," Frost said, reciting the line like a prayer. "Victims or not. Protocol also remembers its heart," Envoy Leora 10 replied from behind the Sovereign. She stepped forward, human and slight, carrying a case stuffed with thin slates. The insignia on her sleeve marked her as legal counsel for someone with patience and long memory. Article 15, Emergency Aid Across Sentient Lines. The mechanic acted within the brace window. Frost glanced at Milo. "You always did read the small type." "I fix things," Milo answered. "Small type keeps engines and people from exploding." Sovereign Flintscale lowered his head until his eyes met Milo's directly. Close up, the old dragon scales weren't just black. They held a galaxy of faint silver lines, as if maps had been etched across them and then half erased by time. "Months ago," the Sovereign said, "my youngest child slipped from a broken pod near a human grid. A mechanic gave her fuel and aid. He asked for nothing. Today, my sons lie in your dust and breathe, because you did not turn away." The soldiers looked at one another. Even Commander Frost's posture eased by a fraction, curiosity prying at his caution. "I do not barter with gratitude," the Sovereign continued. "I recognize debt. 3 lives weigh heavy. If I protect this human, I do not only guard him, I teach my own that kindness binds stronger than fear." Milo felt heat rise in his face. "I'm no symbol," he muttered. "I'm behind on rent." Envoy 10's mouth curved. "Symbols also owe rent." Embercrest pushed himself a little higher, keeping pressure off the twisted limb. Galeclaw's breath steadied under the sealant patch. The torn wing no longer leaked its dark shimmer. The young dragons watched the adults trade words as if learning some new craft that wasn't hammer or flame. Commander Frost broke the quiet. "What do you want, Sovereign?" "To prevent foolishness," Flintscale answered. "And to turn a small bay into a doorway. I named this human under my protection. Harm him, you challenge me." Also, he looked at his sons, and a sigh threaded the edges of his voice. "They will remain as apprentices. They will learn human technique. They will share draconian method. Work will temper pride." Embercrest flicked an ear ridge. "Father." "Work," the Sovereign repeated, "not unkind. You ran from a promise made without your consent. Now you will keep a promise you choose. To spend time learning what strength means when it lifts instead of breaks." Commander Frost eyed Milo. "You are suggesting the Federation House Royal Apprentices in a civilian bay. The optics." A new presence stepped through the door. Captain Bryn Vale, a merchant Milo had patched up more than once, hands always ink-smudged from manifests. She raised both palms in a peaceable hello. "Optics look like ships that fly again," she said. "Folks trust this shop because Milo explains first and bills second. If draconian craft and human freighters can be fixed side by side without sparks turning into wars, customers will line up from here to the rim." Envoy 10 tapped a slate. "A joint exchange, pilot programs on neutral docks, clear safety rules, voluntary crews, and full transparency for civilian systems. We can draft it." Commander Frost rubbed his brow as if the headache were forming with the shape of the idea. "And if it fails? Then we try again," Milo said, before think. "That's how I fix anything worth keeping." The Sovereign's laugh was soft, a warm rumble that settled the room. "Practical wisdom," he said, "and necessary." He turned to his sons. "Embercrest, Galeclaw, here are your tasks. Obey the mechanic's safety rules as you would a flight captain's orders. Share knowledge without arrogance. Respect the small tools, for they teach large patience. If you set anything on fire without cause, you will scrub Gex until your claws shine. Galeclaw managed a tired smile. Yes, father. Commander Frost signaled his troopers to stand at ease. I will file this as a monitored partnership, he said at last. No secret tests, no staged failures. The border has enough ghosts. Envoy 10 slid a simple document onto Milo's workbench. Sign here, and it becomes official. Milo stared at the line where his name would go. He thought of long days, quiet nights, the sweet ache of engines finally purring after hours of stubborn bolts. He thought of risk like a coin in his pocket, worn, familiar. Then he signed, and the coin changed into something bright. The sovereign inclined his head. Then it is set. My sons remain. My fleet withdraws to proper distance. And, Commander, if a stray inspection wanders here too often, I will assume curiosity and send tea. Tea, Frost echoed, dry. We will be measured. Captain Bryn slapped the bench lightly. I'll spread the word. Honest work happening here, no matter the scales or skin. As the visitors departed to inform the world that it had tilted, Milo checked Galeclaw's pulse again and adjusted the makeshift dressing. Embercrest watched every motion, soaking up steps with soldierly focus. You'll hate the first week, Milo said, because everything will feel slow. Then your claws will learn the weight of a bolt and the balance of a torque arm, and you'll start to enjoy the quiet. Quiet is underrated, Embercrest murmured. Not in a shop, Milo said. In a shop, quiet means something just got fixed. Hours later, the bay settled into its new shape. Milo drafted a list. Safety drills, tool etiquette, emergency protocols, cultural notes like never flame polish near sensitive sensors. He hung it on a pegboard and added one line at the bottom that made him smile without meaning to. Be kind. It is efficient. The meteor grit still hissed along the hull. Beyond, the outpost rotated under a lattice of stars. Under those stars, a human mechanic and two royal younglings wrote the first lines of a different story, using scrap metal, patient hands, and a stubborn refusal to give up on better. By the third month, Harp and Sons Exchange Dock was a joke that landed every time. No one knew who the Sons were at first. Then they stepped through the door, and the joke became a grin. Between shifts, someone painted a sign in neat script. Honest repairs for anyone who flies. It was not quiet. It was excellent. Milo discovered that Galeclaw had a gift for fine calibrations. The green youngling could adjust crystal matrices by feel, humming a note that guided tiny alignments until the display lit perfect. Embercrest gravitated toward heavy frames and safety systems. He learned to spot fatigue in a strut from across the bay and never let a customer leave with a compromised seal. Both wrote notes on small tablets, awkward claws growing graceful with practice, the way any apprentice learns a craft, one careful line at a time. Apprentice June Rowe, a human with a steady laugh and a steadier soldering hand, joined the team after her freighter limped in on Patchwork Hope. She stayed for the learning and the way Milo treated questions like treasures. She taught Galeclaw how to make neat labels. Galeclaw taught her how draconian graphene, braided into human cabling, could reduce heat loss. They traded snacks from lunch tins and vocabulary from different worlds. Quartermaster Narek, a draconian with an eye for numbers and an obsession with punctual deliveries, set up a small desk near the entrance and declared it logistics. He negotiated fair prices, tracked stock, and reminded everyone that spare fuses do not multiply on their own. The bay ran smoother with Narek's rhythm in place, even if his tail thumped when shipments were late. Customers arrived wary and left telling stories. A farmer from a rim moon watched, jaw loose, as a dragon delicately tightened a fuel regulator. A courier explained 3 times that he could not afford premium parts, and Galeclaw suggested a recycled module with life left in it at a fraction of the price. A schoolteacher toured the workshop with a class and whispered afterward that she had not realized dragons smiled. Once, a visitor from the Serpentine sector stood in the doorway like a blade. Her escort waited at respectful distance as protocol demanded. Her voice, when she spoke, was smooth as polished met. "I have a contract that mentions a name I recognize," she said. "A promise signed without all hearts consenting. I am here to observe, not to claim." Milo nodded and offered tea that was half steam, half awkwardness. The visitor walked the bay slowly, watching Galeclaw explain a repair with careful joy, and Embercrest pause mid-lift to let a child tug at a wing edge with round eyes. When she left, she pressed a thin card into Milo's hand. "If anyone tries to force old words on young souls," she said, "call this number. I prefer new words." The day after, Commander Frost arrived with a clipboard and a look he called his inspection face. The look dissolved when a small maintenance drone zipped past his ear, carrying a flower someone had attached to its casing. Milo guided him around, explaining how human safety manuals and draconian flight rituals had been woven into a single, plain-spoken handbook. Frost took a copy. Later, Milo would catch the commander reading it in a corner and making notes like a student. "Are you happy?" Frost asked, surprisingly soft. Milo considered the scorch mark by the tool crib and the patched deck tile where Galeclaw had once misjudged a landing. He considered the laughter that often drowned the whine of power tools, and the way fear had drained from customers' eyes over time. "Yes," he said, "and tired, which is another kind of yes." Problems came, as they always do. A shipment of counterfeit regulators almost slipped through, until June spotted a microscopic flaw. Narek negotiated a replacement and sent a sternly polite message that began with the words, "as partners in safety," and ended with, "please do not attempt to trick my inventory again." Embercrest discovered that flame-polishing aluminum, near sensor loops, left a smear of failure, and spent an afternoon sanding parts by hand while muttering about humility. The shop changed the outpost in quiet increments. 2 eateries added draconian-friendly menus. Children started drawing ships with mixed crews. A small bulletin board appeared in the corridor where people pinned notes, looking for work, offering lessons, lost glove, found courage. One evening, Captain Bryn Vale returned with a stabilizer singing the wrong note. The fix was simple. The conversation that followed was not. A case had reached the gossip feeds. A human colony ship had strayed near a draconian patrol route. Tempers flared. A warning shot burned too close. Rumors multiplied. Demands, accusations, a word everyone had hoped to bury: war. "It's probably nothing," Bryn said, voice brittle. Milo felt the air thin around them. Embercrest and Galeclaw stilled, listening in the way creatures do when storms gather beyond the horizon. The next day, the message came. A neutral tribunal, representatives from both sides. A request, not for a lawyer or a soldier, but for a Mecca. Someone both worlds, now recognized, not for polished speeches, but for useful honesty. "They want you," Commander Frost said, standing in the doorway with the awkwardness of a friend wearing a uniform. "You're the only human the Draconian Council trusts to speak plain, and the only human we can send who won't set matches near dry tinder." Galeclaw set down his tablet. "We go too." "Please," Embercrest added, chin lifted. "We stand with our teacher." Milo eyed his list of pending repairs. The stack of forms Narek expected signed. The apprentices scheduled to learn safe torch use next week. He also saw thread stretched between all those small things and the large thing now calling his name. "Pack light," he said finally, "and bring the handbook." June pressed the charm into his palm, a tiny wrench hammered from scrap. "For luck," she said. "For work," Milo corrected, smiling. "Luck is just practice with better lighting." As the transport hummed to life, the bay lights glowed warm. The sign by the door caught a gleam from the engine wash. "Honest repairs for anyone who flies." Milo touched the letters as he passed, then stepped into a ship that smelled of metal and possibility, carrying with him 2 young dragons, a handbook, and a simple idea that had fixed a lot of broken things already. Listen first, mend second, teach always. The neutral station looked like a polished needle pinned against the dark. Inside, a circular hall held people who did not often meet without shields in the way. Admiral Keen stood with the Federation delegation, posture a sculpture of resolve. General Ironcrest watched from the Draconian side, his scales burnished like armor at dawn. Translators hovered near the ceiling like small moons. The air smelled faintly of recycled citrus and worry. Milo had been given a seat at the center table. No one told him what to say. Perhaps they knew better. Embercrest and Galeclaw stood just behind his chair, silent and large, a presence that steadied him more than he wanted to admit. Commander Frost sat to one side, as if promising to catch any words that slipped. The case was simple, and also not. A human colony ship, weary and full of families, had veered to avoid a radiation swell. The safest corridor on their charts turned out to be a draconian patrol lane, newly designated and not shared. A patrol boat had moved to intercept, alarms rising on both bridges. Nothing irreversible had happened yet. The yet clanged in every sentence. Admiral Keen spoke first. "Our captain made the safest choice using available data." General Ironcrest answered. "Available data was incomplete by your design. Secrets cause collisions." Voices rose, measured but tight. Law terms clinked like cutlery. Someone invoked precedent from a case older than anyone present. Someone else argued intent versus effect. Milo listened until the shape of the conversation repeated, a wheel stuck in its rut. He stood. "You're all right," he said, and the hall turned toward the mechanic, who had grease under his nails and a borrowed jacket that didn't quite fit. "And you're all missing the hole in the floor." Ironcrest tilted his head. "The hole?" "The empty space where shared maps should be," Milo answered. He touched the console and brought up a local projection. "This region has quirks, gravity wells, debris streams, little storms that come and go. Our civilian charts mark some, yours mark others. The safest route moves like a riverbank after heavy rain. If we don't talk, the river keeps shifting and we pretend not to notice." A few smiles flickered despite the tension. Milo tapped points of light. "My shop learned to mix human manuals and draconian flight habits because otherwise, bolts roll under benches and go missing. Your borders are my missing bolt. I don't need military secrets to keep a family ship from drifting into the wrong current. I need a simple promise. For civilian lanes, we share updates. We establish rescue beacons both sides maintain. We train crews to call each other when instruments go strange, and we teach them not to be proud about it." Admiral Keen's jaw softened. "There are risks." "There are more if we don't," Milo replied. "Fear grows best in the dark. Maps are light." General Ironcrest's gaze slid to the young dragons behind Milo. "And if someone uses the light against us," Embercrest spoke for the first time, voice low, "then we dim the lamplight over military doors and brighten it over kitchen tables and school transports. We will survive clever enemies. We will not survive infinite accidents. Galeclaw added, almost shy, we can start small. A ring around the borders, 50 light-years wide. Only civilian lanes. Only non-weapon signals. Teams from both species check the markers twice a month. If trust grows, the ring grows. If someone tries to twist it, the ring tightens. The hall rustled, the sound of people noticing a workable hinge. Envoy Leora 10, present as observer, raised a hand. Call it the Corridor Pact. Shared civilian navigation near borders, joint rescue, mutual training, audit logs open to both councils, and a promise that knowledge meant to save will not be used to harm. Violations trigger a pause and review, not a cannon. Admiral Keene looked at General Ironcrest. Something eased in both faces, old weight shifting to better ground. We could live with that, Keene said. We could begin with that, Ironcrest corrected gently. Debate didn't vanish. It changed shape. What markers? Which frequencies? How to label regions without revealing Patra. Milo watched the arguments turn from blame to blueprint and felt a small unspooling in his chest, like a knot, learning it could be a bow. Hours later, signatures glowed on the console. No fireworks, only relieved sighs and the quiet clatter of cups as someone finally remembered to pour water. The Corridor Pact would start as a line of light on shared maps and grow as long as people showed up to keep it honest. Sovereign Flintscale, who had watched silently from a shadowed balcony, stepped down when the hall emptied. He studied Milo with the affectionate severity of a mentor watching a student wire a tricky joint. You drew a simple plan, he said. Simple is hard, Milo answered, rubbing his eyes. Yes, the Sovereign said, and his smile was like banked warmth on a cold shift. And worth it. Commander Frost clapped Milo's shoulder. I'd offer you a desk and a title, he said. But you'd only bring a toolbox to the office. Desks wobble, Milo replied. I could fit. Imbercrest leaned close. You chose again, he said softly. The small risk that saves many. We'll keep choosing, Galeclaw added, quieter still. When they returned to the outpost, the bay smelled like hot metal and pepper soup someone had thoughtfully left simmering. A new group of apprentices waited near the tool wall. 4 humans, 3 draconians, and 1 crystalline engineer, whose color pulses translated to enthusiastic greetings. June had organized a welcome board that read in messy script. We learn by doing, we do by listening. Near the door, a small plaque had appeared. No speeches marked its placing. No ceremony was called. Milo noticed it only when the engine lights splashed across polished letters. It didn't name heroes or weigh debts. It said, here, hands from different worlds turn bolts the same direction. Maps are brighter when shared. Kindness is our most reliable tool. Milo touched the plaque with 2 fingers and felt, not pride exactly, but a grounded sort of rightness, like a ship settling true on its landing skids. Customers would come tomorrow with cracked seals and hopeful eyes. The team would argue about parts and laugh about lunch and write new notes in the handbook. Somewhere out in that thin ring of space, a beacon would blink the agreed-upon pattern, and a family ship would find the safer lane without ever knowing how many hard conversations had lit it. Milo looked at Embercrest and Galeclaw, at June and Narik, at Commander Frost pretending he wasn't smiling, and at the apprentices already comparing gloves. All right, he said, voice steady and ordinary, the way good beginnings often sound. Let's get to work. And in a corner of the galaxy, where a small shop had decided maps should be shared and fear should be starved, engines hummed back to life, one repair, one handshake, one easy kindness at a time.